Today on the show, I'm excited to be sharing a workshop that I gave on developing a vision. As you listen, make sure you have a notebook nearby because I will be sharing some tips for creating a vision for your year, for developing the virtue that you need to carry out that vision, as well as beginning to facilitate better habits so that these big ideals that we have as families can start to become a reality. So I hope you enjoy this show. You can use Restoration 10 to get 10% off anything in our shop and listen to the end for a special code to save on our membership, the Restoration Home community. This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about the peaceful path to connected families and restored communities. So I'm just going to start kind of by introducing myself. I'm Jennifer Pepito. I'm the author of Habits for a Sacred Home and Mothering by the Book. And I'm also the host of the Restoration Home podcast and the creator of the Peaceful Press Homeschool curriculum. And I love goal setting, actually. In 2015, we did, and I had already been setting goals since probably 2008 was when I really started more formally setting goals for myself. And I went to this workshop and this lady was talking about how it's really important to consider all of the areas of our life as we are setting goals. And so at that time, I started setting my own personal goals in several different areas. And I'm just going to show you the front page of each month of the Peaceful Press Planner. This is the printed one, but the printable version that's available online, Emily will put those links in here, is really similar. It actually has the opportunity to set goals for your home and your school and your spiritual and your work and your health and your relational. So for a long time since I went to this workshop, I've been setting goals in all these different areas of my life, recognizing that my spiritual life needs attention. My physical health needs attention. My homeschool needs attention. My at this point, my work life needs attention. So learning how to kind of examine each area of our life and set goals in those areas has been life-changing for me, and a big part of being able to write a book. That was on my dream list for many years before I actually was able to have a published book. Creating the Peaceful Press curriculum, that was on my dream list for several years before I was actually able to figure out the steps to writing and producing a homeschool curriculum. So it is so exciting to be able to share some of the things I've learned over the past, 15 years of goal setting with each one of you. And, I know that we're all in different phases of life. Like somebody in my local homeschool community sent a text this morning saying like, I don't know what to do because I've got all these little kids. And I just don't feel like I can set goals right now. It's just really intense with just taking care of my kids. And it is true that there's going to be seasons in our life where we're not going to have as much bandwidth for setting goals or setting big goals. And something that was very revolutionary for me was learning how to set goals for being and doing. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about here is just learning how to have a vision. I'm going to share my screen for a few minutes, and then I'm going to probably pop back out because there's a lot going on here between letting people in and, but I just want to show you, today we're talking about habits for a sacred home. This is not just about, our home life. This is about our families, our spiritual lives. So many parts of our lives rely on kind of having some habits, but we really can't do much about habits until we have a vision. And so, as we are like thinking about habits, we have to think first about what kind of person do we even want to be? In Habits for a Sacred Home, I talked about these 9 women in history who, they really exemplified what we're talking about here about having habits that actually created progress for them towards being the kind of Christian women who would make an impact in culture. And I think sometimes when people hear that word habits, they're like, what does this mean? What are habits for a sacred home? What does this sacred mean? And that can be actually really intimidating. but sacred just means consecrated to God. So this isn't about having like a perfect home or having a home where everything is always peaceful and everybody behaves themselves. That's not the point of this at all. It's actually more about recognizing that our homes are consecrated to God. So whether it's a good day or a bad day, we are living each day in light of the fact that we are in him. It says in him we live and move and have our being. And so I think first of all, setting that idea to rest that you have to be perfect, that's not the point at all. But we do have to have a vision. So the first step to creating a sacred home is to just have a vision of what does that mean for you? How many of you, there's maybe somebody that you admire in life? Write in the chat if there's someone you admire, if there's a mom that you've been learning from who's really inspired you, or maybe there's a homeschool hero. Maybe it was one of the women in Habits for a Sacred Home. Like for me, reading about Edith Schaefer and seeing the way that she served her family and served to this community and also wrote books and also tried to make the world a more beautiful place. It was such an inspiration to me. I just read the story of Joan of Arc over Christmas break and reading about how Joan of Arc was listening so closely to the Lord that even though what she really wanted to do was stay at home with her mommy and, be in the fields and walk in the nature and kiss the trees, she ended up having to go to war for her country. And so just watching the way that she was so obedient to God inspired me. So in the chat, just share, is there somebody, a person, a book that you've read that you're like, that's the kind of person I want to be? What kind of woman do you want to be? What do you want people to say about you at the end of your life? This is what we want to think about first off, is just really describe that. And this is what we also talk about in our Restoration Home community. This is going to be reviewed again in January, is like, what do we want our children to remember about life in our home? Because if we start planning goals and just thinking about what we want to get done, it's actually going to be pretty shallow. It's not going to accomplish probably what we want it to be, because it's not all about what we get done. It's actually a lot more about what kind of culture we're creating and what kind of people we're becoming and how aware we are of God and how much we're attuned to God. And so, as you guys are thinking about this, think about like, what kind of person do I want to be? And I love just reading some of the things that you guys, there's people are talking about the homeschool planner, but also Elizabeth Elliot as an example of someone that you want to be like. Ma from Little House on the Prairie, she was so patient. She had a lot of fear, but she still went off into the wilds with her family and overcame that fear. Corrie ten Boom, that's another great one. Corrie ten Boom was, so brave in following her family and going with her family into the prison, saying yes to God, even though it was such a hard situation that she was called to. And so there's so many beautiful examples that we can look at. I know during the COVID pandemic, I was always thinking, what would Betsy do? Betsy was Corrie ten Boom's sister in the book, The Hiding Place. And she was just always so submitted to God and so joyful, even in the worst of circumstances. As well, I see Rose Deibler, one of my favorite, Darlene Deibler. I think it's Darlene Deibler Rose was her final name. Her book is called, Emily, put the name of the book in the chat if you can think of it. Just a beautiful book about someone who was imprisoned by the Japanese during World War II and continued to just walk in such beauty and purity and hope despite what she was experiencing. So there are so many beautiful people that we can look at. So just as you guys have been thinking about like your heroes and the people that you look to for wisdom and encouragement, the people that you look to model yourself after, just write a short description. I'm actually going to even give you a minute to be quiet, because sometimes we listen to these workshops or we listen to a podcast, because we talked about some of this even recently on the Restoration Home podcast. And it's easy to, read about these things or listen to something and then never apply it to our lives. But I've actually, I've written these things down year after year. I've meditated on it so that during the Christmas break, when all of my children were home, we had 12 people under our roof Christmas Eve. And I was, cooking and cleaning. And there was a few moments where I was like, oh, it'd be nice if some of these people would get in the kitchen and help me. And obviously some of those people did get in the kitchen and help me, Emily being one of them. But there's moments, I'm sure all of you felt this over the Christmas holidays where you're working so hard to serve your family, and it can be easy for a little bit of irritation to creep in. Raise your hand on your virtual hand there if you experience that. And so for me, because I had such a clear vision that I am a dignified queen of my home, and I love my family well, and I'm a safe space for my family. And because I had that vision, I was able to keep going without meltdowns. Now, I've not always been that way. Like I have had, meltdowns where I felt pushed to the wall and I cry, or I have slammed cupboard doors. I have ran to my room and slammed my bedroom door. Like I have behaved in a very undignified and unqueenly manner. But we can grow, and part of growing is being very clear about who we want to be, the kind of woman we want to be, the kind of person that we want people to describe, at our funeral. When they're reading our eulogy, what will they say about us? So just I'm going to be quiet for a minute so you can just think for a minute, like what is it that we want to be? And you can just use words to describe yourself, like dignified, queenly, kind, patient. You could use phrases. I just wrote my being and doing goals for the year. And kind of that's a way of sort of describing what kind of person you want to be and what kind of things you want to do. And so some of my being goals, some of the kind of person I want to be, were a lover and listener to Jesus, a safe space for my husband and children, a creator, someone who's making new things and making the world more beautiful, a kind and caring daughter, mother, grandma, and friend, disciplined, organized, and virtuous, unshakable, full of faith and hope no matter the circumstances, fun, a ray of sunshine in my life, in my family, and a tree hugger, someone who prioritizes being barefoot on the grass, wading in the creek, and sitting on a rock listening to Jesus. So, what are kind of some of the phrases that you guys would want people to describe you, or that the kind of ways that you want to be in your life? Write some of those in the chat. And as you're writing them down, just share a few of those phrases with us. And some of these things, I love writing on paper, but some of these things, it's also helpful to maybe make a note in your phone so that you can look at it often. These, the being and doing goals I just read to you, I actually have those pasted on my bedroom wall as well. Brooke says inspiring, creative, free and elegant and organized. Rachel says stalwart, nurturing, warm-hearted, and pious. These are just beautiful. Nikki says a hunger for God. Beth Adams says diligent. Bethany says wholehearted, fearless, full of love and laughter. These are such beautiful descriptions of the kind of person that you want to be, and what an encouragement for yourselves to know this. So once you have a vision, then what we do is we start to cultivate the virtues that match up to that vision. So, if you have this vision about how to be the kind of person you want to be, you have to also start developing virtue. But I want to say something real quick. Some of you might actually be in a season where you can't even envision what kind of person you want to be. Like life has been so hard for you that you have no idea. You're too tired. And I do understand that there are seasons where we haven't had enough rest. We're so depleted that we really can't dream about life, what life could be. And I just want to share a couple things you can do to move towards vision when you're feeling that way. Partly it might just take you a little bit longer. Like you might need to take the month of January just to journal about last year. Maybe you need to take a little bit of time to cry about things that were hard. Maybe you need to just take a couple days to really sleep and eat and take walks in nature and rest, and not really think too much about what you're going to do in the future, what your big dreams are, what kind of woman you want to become. Because there are seasons in our lives where we can just get so tired and depleted that we just can't really think about what the future might hold. And that's okay, because there is, in the Bible, it says there's a time for everything, a time for sowing and a time for reaping. And so if this is maybe like a little fallow season, a little winter season for you, that's okay. One of the things I've done in those seasons is just make a vision board. So setting up some magazines and a piece of cardstock and snipping out the pictures that are interesting to me, and then gluing them on a piece of paper, that sort of just sparks a little bit of joy or a little bit of vision. So there are things that we can do if you're in sort of that maybe fallow season to start sparking a little bit of joy and bringing up a dream. But I just think it's so important to pace yourself and not worry about setting a bunch of big goals if you don't feel that right now. And then the other thing, I think it's important to notice, like, Jessica says, it's a baby year for us. And in those baby years, like, we have to be so responsive. We had our 2.5-year-old grandbaby and our 4-month-old grandbaby in our home quite a lot this Christmas season. And there's not a lot of time to like sit around journaling your thoughts and feelings. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of time where you're holding a baby and rocking a baby. And those are times maybe where you can really think. Maybe you can make voice memos. Like I did a couple of voice memos over the season. My 2.5-year-old grandbaby grabbed my face yesterday and said, "Grammy, you are always so sweet to me." And that went in my voice memo right away. Like that was something I don't want to forget. And so maybe right now you're just going to take a little bit of time to notice your family, notice what your kids are saying, notice how your home is going, and take some notes on that. Take some little videos, take some snapshots, because there will be a season later where you maybe have more energy for bigger goals or bigger vision. But in any case, we still have to have a vision for the kind of person we want to become, because our children are watching us. They're watching us all the time. And we are creating right now the kind of home that they will remember when they're older. And so for me, like early on, when Emily, my co-host here, was 3 years old, I started envisioning the kind of homeschool I wanted. Like I wanted us to walk in nature and I wanted us to have good habits. I wanted us to eat healthy food. And so having a really clear vision early about what I wanted to look like, it just changed the trajectory of our homeschool. It really shaped how we learned and how we created as a family. And then the atmosphere that my children are creating in their homes as adults. So I think you all either have a vision right now or you have some clarity about how you're going to get there. The next step is actually to nurture virtue, because if you have a vision, but so say you have a vision to behave like a queen. Say you have a vision that you're going to be a dignified person who's present with your children and nurturing and caring. But every time your child misbehaves, you run to the bathroom and scroll Instagram for an hour. Your vision and your virtues not aligning. And it's normal for us to want to escape feelings of unrest or discomfort. But in the Restoration Home community this year, and as people, we have to be continually like pushing towards virtue, making those 1% improvements towards the virtues that will help us align with our vision. So, virtue, like for instance, if my vision is to put my family first and to be present with my family, but I'm constantly making plans for girlfriend weekends, then actually my vision and virtue are not aligned and one needs to adjust. So virtue makes way for attunement with God, because as we have a vision and then we put in the virtue, whether it's self-control or diligence or, some of the habits that we talked about in habits for a sacred home, work and prayer, as we put in the time to cultivate virtue, to cultivate those habits, then we start to align with our vision and there becomes integrity and cohesiveness. And that's where we really start to experience that shalom in our homes of nothing missing and nothing broken. And so I think that's so important for us to think about, what are the virtues that we have cultivated? Like when you look back in 2024, we had so many beautiful testimonies of women and the accomplishments that they made through the Restoration Home community of feeling more at peace in their homes and more connected to their families. What are some of the virtues this year that you can really say, I made progress in this? Like in our family, my husband was a ministry student this year, and I was able to say I made a lot of progress in being at rest and being at peace with what is a little bit of an uncomfortable situation for me. And so I'm sure for all of you, you can look at your lives right now and see, wow, I mean, we went through this hard season. We lost a family member. I had sick children, or we moved away from family, or whatever it might be. And you could see, wow, there are some ways that I really saw God's the presence of God and the behavior of God manifest in my life. Like my virtue is starting to align with my vision. So write that down for a minute. Take a minute to just celebrate some of the progress that you made, whether it's that you had more faith this year, or you were more patient with your kids this year, or you spent less time scrolling social media, or you had more self-discipline in the area of nurturing your health or your home. Just take a minute and share in the chat and write it down in your notes. How did I grow in virtue this year? And I'm gonna, we have a few more points to cover, and then at the end, I'm gonna share a coupon code for those of you who are going to be joining the Restoration Home community for the first time this year. I have a special code for you to get in at a discounted rate. So feel free to share in the chat some of the ways that you grew in virtue this year. And also, it might be good to take a minute and sort of recognize some of the vices you still want to work on. Like for me, I really, really want to spend the first time of my day, like the first period of my day, reading my Bible and journaling and in prayer. But I still some days grab my phone first. And I don't like that about myself. I'm not proud of it. And it's something that I'm going to keep working on. So, it might be a time also just to write down, like, what are some of the maybe vices or bad habits that I'd like to work on this year? And so I'm going to just read out some of the ways that you guys have grown while you think about some of the vices you want to work on. And you don't have to share those in the chat. So Andy says, I maintained peace in the home during my husband's unexpected hospital stay and eye contact with kids. Well done, Andy. And Hannah says, I grew in stability this year and life changes. And it started in the Restoration Home community when I joined in July. Thank you so much, Hannah. What a joy it has been to have you. We had so much fun at the retreat. Brooke said, I got better at doing the laundry and chores on a regular basis, taking back the atmosphere of my own home. And I love that. That's such a powerful phrase because we really are the thermostats of our home. My dad said to me once, you are the cheerleader of this operation. So our attitudes and our actions in our home have such a big impact on our families. Jessica said, I prioritize my faith and discipling my family. And Mindy said she grew in hospitality this year. Kristen spent more time in God's word this year. Anna said our conversations have been more centered around Jesus. These are so beautiful. And I think that's one of the beauties of having a community to run with is that we're not learning on our own. Like some of us, might be quiet because we feel like, I don't feel like I made a lot of progress this year. But when we see the progress other people have made, it feels like, oh, if this mom who also had a baby this year can do it, I can do it. Or if this mom who also had an illness to deal with can do it, I can do it. And so there's so much encouragement here. Samantha said she grew in her faith this year. Chelsea said she grew in godly virtue by getting more confident in her business and walking out a vision. Claudia said she took action steps towards the things she values. Lisa learned to be more gracious with herself and her kids. This is such a good virtue, so important as a foundational virtue. Amanda said her home's becoming more and more Jesus focused. These are so beautiful. Growth and caring about my job at home, growing in faith, growing in flexibility. Well done. Like you guys should all be giving yourself a really big like hand clap. And I'm gonna like celebrate you all right now for the major progress you guys have made. Incredible progress, developing more virtue this year. And that's the beautiful thing. If you are entering the new year feeling kind of bad about the progress you made, it's always good to stop and just say a little prayer of forgiveness. And in the Restoration Home Journal of Reflection, Emily could get that link off of Amazon and put it in here. We gave it away as a gift at the retreat, but it's basically a journal of reflection. There's 52 questions in there. And there's also a forgiveness prayer. And it's such a good practice to regularly forgive yourself as a mom. Because as we're parenting, we're always going to be making mistakes. And if we start identifying ourselves by our mistakes, it makes it really hard to get traction towards feeling hopeful about life and feeling like a queen and feeling like someone who's making a beautiful impact in your family. And so if we can take time throughout the year to, like look at that reflection journal, pray through pray through a little forgiveness prayer towards yourself. God, thank you for forgiving me. And I choose to forgive myself for yelling at my kids this year, or I choose to forgive myself for not being very hopeful. Like one of the, painful family memories that we have is a, we, we went on a trip and there was a family crisis going on, and I did not have a good attitude on this trip, and it kind of ruined the whole trip for our family. And it was my attitude. Like, we were in a beautiful location, but my attitude actually ruined that trip. And so when we know we've done wrong, it is important to just take time to receive the grace of God. Because in the Restoration Home community, we have a PDF this year. There's 52 virtues that we're going to be working on, and it's got all these different virtues plus a story and a practice that goes along with it. So if you join the Restoration Home community, each week there'll be a new virtue that we're going to work on together, a practice and a story that goes with it. So, and someone just shared the link for someone who's looking for the presentation. So I stopped presenting the slides because I really like seeing your faces and not this big screen. So virtue, we're going to work on virtues, and I love that you guys could all recognize ways that you'd grown, and maybe you've also identified a few vices that you want to overcome. So you don't have to share that in the chat, but how many of you wrote down a vice you want to overcome? Like for some of us, I just read this thing that talked about how, so many of the addictions that people face are kind of escapes from loneliness. And so learning how to just connect with God when we're feeling uncomfortable or unrest instead of scrolling online or some of the other things that we do. So Emily just shared a screenshot. So like, this is the first month of virtues: being restorative, being intentional, being peaceful, being responsive. So each month there'll be another set of 4 virtues we're going to work on. So the final thing is habits. We have a vision, we have virtue, but if we don't have daily habits, then it's going to be still not a lot of traction towards virtue and towards our vision. Because for instance, I have a vision to be attuned to God. I have a vision to be the kind of person who is like responsive to him, and who is a peaceful presence in my home, who almost like has almost like carries shalom, so that when people are around me, they feel more peaceful. Now, cultivating that, part of it is just being with God. The more we're with God, the more we are transformed into his image. It says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But renewing our minds takes the habit of stillness, or it takes the habit of reading the word. It takes the habit of worship. It takes the habit of being with God. And so that is where we start as we're developing virtuous lives or visionary lives, is we start with small daily habits, 1% improvement. So Amanda said, are we going to be able to access the slides when we're off the meet? We will be able to access the slides there. We shared the link, and so you can grab those slides. I'll also share them in the replay. I'm going to send the replay out, and I'll also put them in the band group for Restoration Home. So we'll be able to relook at the slides. So so there has to be some attention to habits. Another one, if my vision is to love my children well, but I don't make them breakfast, I don't make sure they're fed before co-op, I get up too late, like then my vision and my values aren't really aligning. So, and I love that Alice said, it's easy sometimes to see our shortcoming instead of the things that are going well. And Nikki echoed that, but that's part of what we're doing as we develop a visionary community, is that we're celebrating progress together. Like we had a mom who earlier in the year, she was really struggling with staying responsive to her kids and connecting and feeling confident. And she sent a picture in the group of this happy crafting moment they were having, and talked about how much fun they were having in this moment together. And so, it's okay to struggle. Like, this is part of life. I mean, if we didn't struggle, we wouldn't have needed Jesus, but still we can make progress. And so that's the hopefulness about practices, about habits, is that we can just continually make that little bit of improvement, just one thing at a time. And so, if our vision is to be a calm and loving presence, then we have to have a habit of being with God. If our vision is to love our children well and for them to feel loved, then we have to take time to look them in the eyes and to give them a hug and to make sure they're fed well. So there's all these little tiny habits that equal our vision, that work up to our vision. So one of the first habits that we actually work on is tracking our time. This is what we're going to work on in the Restoration Home in January, is just looking at how we actually spend our time, because so often we know what we want to be like. We know what we want our children to experience. And yet our days end up so much different than we hope them to be. We end up putting out fires or organizing for too long. Like some of these little tasks of managing our homes can become bigger than the task of actually mothering our children. And so learning to have, some habits of connection or some habits of just putting things in their place, as in putting our time in its place. So for myself, like when I plan out a week, I include a habit tracker. And in the Restoration Home digital planner, or the Peaceful Press digital planner, Emily could link that. And in the Peaceful Press student planner, those both have a they both have a habit tracker, because it's hard to remember all the things we want to do every day. But if you can just jot down in your planner, and even like in my Peaceful Press printed planner, I'll just write, water, vitamins, exercise, read aloud, and put a little check by those things. So if you can have some kind of a habit tracker, it'll help you to keep going with those habits. And really revisiting it in the beginning of the month and the end of the month. So what are some of the habits? Like, think about right now, what are some of the habits that you guys want to work on? Maybe 3 habits that you want to work on to get closer to your vision. And Emily, in the Dropbox, there's a link that's called Essential Habits. And that would be great to share as a freebie as well. It's something that kind of has a list of the habits we're working on, this habits for a sacred home. And Andy says nature walks with kids. I love that. No screens before devotions. That's Sadie's habit that she's working on this year. More outside time, early rising. I love that habit. Andy's got a habit of painting with kids and by herself. And that was one of the things I added to, I actually created myself a weekly schedule and added something creative every day in the Peaceful Press homeschool curriculum elementary years. Each day kind of has a different theme. So like Thursday would be a baking day, and Wednesday's a nature walk day, and Tuesday's a project day, and Monday's a looking at art day. So if you're trying to incorporate more creativity, the elementary resources all have that linked in. Lauren says sugar only on special occasions. That's a great, I need to work on the sugar vice too, Lauren. That was quite fun with Christmas. Sarah says outside more. Lisa says, stop working, take time to enjoy hobbies. I know that can be hard for us sometimes when we're, it's easy to like keep homeschooling after our children are saturated with information, or keep organizing when it's actually time to start making dinner, or, whatever it might be. Daytime reading, not just before bedtime. What a good example to your children, Brooke. Amanda says, get in her Bible, time in nature, and read a book for enjoyment. I love that. Less screen time, early rising. And Jessica, I gave up on that altogether when I was breastfeeding my babies. And then it's been easier later on to get up earlier. So I think sometimes there's just a season where early rising is not the easiest. Claudia says devotion and worship time. Sylvie says getting a little bit less on the sugar. Same. That's really sweet. Samantha says letting my house be a house that's lived in. And sometimes, it's easy to focus on habits like having a clean house, but what about the vision of having a home where people feel safe and welcome? So I think there can be maybe some adjustments we even need to make in our doing goals so that we align with our vision. So maybe it means not having decorative floor pillows if you're spending hours every day putting, or decorative couch pillows if they're on the floor all the time. Or, maybe it means simplifying some of the cleaning processes. So I love that. Catherine says have a solid homeschool routine, make space for one-on-one with our 4 children. So there's so many good habits you guys are talking about. And in the Restoration Home community this year, we have a different set of habits that we're going to work on each month. So there's 3 habits a month. And Emily just shared the master habit checklist in the file here. We usually include a habit for connection, a habit that implements and helps our families kind of get on track. Like in January, we're going to work on chore chart training. How many of you, raise your hand if you've ever started a chore chart and then abandon it 2 days in? So we're actually going to hold each other accountable to work on those chore charts. I'm excited about that. There's habits for connection, like looking our children in the eyes. So we're going to work on all of these beautiful habits this year. And, one of the things that can really help us as we're cultivating habits. And I know, I think probably at least half of the moms in the group are in Restoration Home Community. And so we all know this is true, that we do better when we have a community that supports our virtues. Like, if you want to create a peaceful home for your children, but your friends are always screaming at their kids, it's going to be hard for you to step out of that kind of culture and create something different. If your value is to feed your family healthy food, but every time you go to your friends for dinner, it's like all junk food. It's going to be hard to live by your virtues. And I don't think we just abandon our communities, but sometimes we need to find communities who are living by the values that we hold. And I know for me, like, I don't know that I would have homeschooled if there weren't some people in my church who were so attentive to their children, had such a good relationship with their kids, and were homeschooling. If I I started homeschooling, and then my siblings all started homeschooling as well. So the whole 27 years I was homeschooling, almost that whole time, my siblings were all homeschooling their children as well. And so we had this beautiful support system of living by these greater values. James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, says, join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. And I just think that is such an important reminder to us that if we want to cultivate a certain kind of behavior, a certain way of living, then we have to start to work on just living by the values that are important to us. We have to start cultivating a community around those values. And Sylvie, I feel like she expressed it so well. She said, I've been so thankful to be a part of the Restoration Home community. It's a place of warm welcome and open arms, not limiting and restricting, but a place of seeking to understand and folding in, of healing and calling mothers to a standard of higher, God-sourced living in order to make the most of this brief time we have. It's a community of foundation building. We're not a group of women chasing after mountaintop moments and experiences. We're a group of women building strong foundations in Jesus, connection, and a contented, quiet, poured out life. We know where our identity lies. And that was such an encouragement to me to read that note from Sylvie. She's one of our Restoration Home community members. And just to recognize the power of being together in a community, that we have a private group. It's not on Facebook, so it's really easy to jump in and jump out without being distracted by 1,000 other notifications. And there's constant reminders of growing as a family. People are talking about their New Year's goals, or they're talking about how the supplements they're taking. They're talking about their mom binders. There's just so many encouraging ideas in there. And I think for all of us who've been a part of it in this last couple of years, our family life, our homes have been really restored in many ways. We've encouraged more connection and better health. Like, I have learned what progesterone to take by suggestions from moms in the group. I have discovered better cleaning products from moms in the group. I've been encouraged by seeing the progress of moms in the group. And so I just love that we get to grow together. And right now, the Restoration Home community is open. We only open a few times a year. And so we have this opening space right now. And if you use the code 2525, you actually get 25% off a year membership. This is for new members. So if you use code 2525, you get 25% off a new membership. And in the Restoration Home community, every week you get a new lesson that comes to your inbox. And then the lesson has some ideas for connection. The lesson has the habits for the week. It has a book, and the book is actually linked to YouTube. So if you can't go to the library, you don't have to. We send that whole book list out at the beginning of the year so that you can see all the books we're reading for the year and reserve them if you want to. This year, we also have this whole pack of 52 virtues that we're going to be working through over the course of the year. And if you join even for a month, you'll get access to that virtue pack. We also have monthly meetings. So once a month, I teach on the book that we're teaching on. So last year we did the Habits for a Sacred Home, and you have access to all 12 meetings for Habits for a Sacred Home. And this year we're going to be reading For the Family's Sake by Susan Schaefer McCauley together. And it's another beautiful foundational book for developing a home that really highlights the vision that you have So we're reading that together and having a monthly meeting, but we're also having an optional second meeting run by mentor moms. We have just such a wealth of wisdom in the mentor moms in this group. We, have moms who've had kids in sensory or occupational therapy. So they have all these great ideas for helping kids with sensory processing disorder or other kinds of learning issues. We have moms who like researched the crap out of progesterone and they know exactly how to balance your hormones and know how important that is to creating a healthier home life. Because if we're not always like bouncing up and down with our emotions, if we're able to stay a little bit more stabilized, then we can be a more peaceful presence for our children. We have a whole Google sheet that includes all of these recommendations. So there's, the moms in the group. We're not professionals. We're not offering professional advice, but the moms in the group are on the ground testing things out with their kids and have just a great list of mom suggested recommendations for anything from non-toxic mattresses to great homeschool books. And then we also have a retreat coming up. So we had 25 women at a retreat in Tennessee. We sat around a bonfire together and talked about our rule of life. And it was just such an incredible time. And that's also a members only freebie. We also are sending out this month a month at a glance. So if you kind of don't need to check in with the weekly lessons, but you still want to track your habits, we're also sending a month at a glance this week that will come out tomorrow in the weekly email so that you can easily see like when the meetings are, what the habits are for the month. And so there's a lot of support in this group. The other thing we're starting this year is regional groups. I'm really excited to have Sylvie and Aaron and Mindy and Meredith and several others who are going to be heading up regional groups with team members. And we're going to expand that. Nikki has stepped up to do it internationally. So if you're an international mom and you'd like to be able to connect with someone in the UK, she's available. So I'm really excited to be able to offer even more like support and community and just connection, because we are on this beautiful sacred journey of raising our children for the Lord. We're on this really important path of just loving our children well and loving our homes and loving our husbands, and it has an eternal impact. It's like there's this interesting irony of that, we can't control the outcome. It's all in the Lord's hands. And yet what we do matters. What we do is so important and so sacred. And so we're really, really excited to be able to support your families in the new year, to continue running together with so many of these beautiful moms right up here on my screen, because it's only showing like a part of the group. I see Andy and Meredith and Sylvie and so many of these beautiful moms who are in the Restoration Home community with us. So we're really excited about this year of cultivating virtue. And I have a few minutes here. If anyone has a question, you could unmute yourself and ask a question. But before I end and before we go to questions, I just want to pray for each one of you. Motherhood is intense. And I made so many mistakes. Like a lot of my books and a lot of what Emily and I talk about on the podcast is related to the mistakes I made. Like I was very fearful. I was a perfectionist. I didn't have any kind of an understanding of being loved by God in spite of my behavior. And so much of what I was doing was trying to prove myself or prove my worth, and really not living in the grace of God and not living in that freedom that comes when you know that you are saved by grace. And so I just want to, tell you moms, like if you're in that place right now where you're just like, I'm so anxious, I have ruined the atmosphere of my home with my yelling, whatever it might be that you're struggling with today, there's always hope. Like, I'm just so grateful. We had all 7 of our children and their loved ones home for Christmas, and there was so much joy and laughter and um, smiles and, just such closeness. And I don't deserve that. Like I've made mistakes where I deserve less than the peaceful, fantastic Christmas I had. I deserve less than my children being so loving and so sweet. The last 2 just left. My son and his wife and baby just flew out last night. So I'm getting a little teary thinking about the Christmas holiday, but I don't necessarily deserve that based on my own behavior, but the Lord is so gracious. And I'm really excited to not just learn from our successes, but also learn from our mistakes. Like I'm able to host a podcast with my oldest daughter, Emily, my guinea pig. Thank you, Emily, for your patience with me, because, we've learned how to love each other and forgive each other and have grace, and not just that, but even to invite Jesus into those broken places, to say, if you've had a really hard year, just start to talk to the Lord about it, and pour out your heart, because he is the friend who sticks closer than a brother. And until we as moms recognize that, until we as moms begin to attune to God and let him comfort us for all the ways that we didn't feel loved as kids, or all the ways that our family life growing up wasn't peaceful, if we don't start to attune to God and let him heal our own broken places, it's going to be hard for us to be something that we've never experienced. The way that the Restoration Home community, a lot of the Peaceful Press resources have come out of just learning to experience the presence of God, and just like to be close to God. Somebody, a mentor, said to me, the face of God is always proximate. That means, like, Jesus is always near to us. He's always there, wanting to be our our shield, our defender, our comforter, our refuge. But so often we are just having a hard time connecting because we feel ashamed or guilty or like failures or fearful. So the more we can work on the vision and the virtue, the more actually we'll be able to put these habits into practice and start. It's a beautiful kind of a holistic cycle of, habits equal virtue equal vision equal habits equal virtue equal vision. And it starts with just beginning to invite Jesus into those broken places, and receiving his love and his forgiveness for the ways that we've messed up, and recognizing that he's so good. And, so I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm just going to pray for us right now. Lord Jesus, I just thank you that here we are at the beginning of a year, January 2nd. It's a new year. Happy New Year. And I just thank you, Lord Jesus, that you are with us, that you want our children's hearts even more than we do. As much as we want our kids to love you and love us, you want that even more. And I just thank you for your goodness. I thank you that you who called will also equip. And so I just pray for each one of these moms who are here, that you'd be with them, that as they're writing down a vision, or working on habits they want to work on, as they're working towards that 1% improvement, that you would empower them, that you would create more peace in their home, that this is a work that only you can do. And so we join with you, Lord Jesus. We join with you in putting the work in, God, but we just recognize that it's all you, God, that it's by your grace that we love our families well, and that we walk in peace in our homes. So I just pray a blessing on each one of these moms and their families, encouraging and protect them in Jesus' name. Amen. So just a reminder, the code is 2525 to get 25% off your membership, yearly or monthly. You can jump in for a month. You can jump in for the year. You save 25% on top of the other 25% if you join for the year. Our retreat is going to be October 10th through 12th. So mark your calendars for that. I know the tickets are going to go really fast. So I will, let you guys know when those are available, and they will be available probably in a month.